they started to interfere in my contact experiences with them, to the point that I was attacked to almost like disease, almost like death. And they came to me, this Anunnaki came to me and said, you have been manipulated from the above levels. You have been, these other Anunnaki entities who are our political enemies, they have targeted you. These greys have that are part of this group, or working with these Anunnakis, have targeted you, and they are the ones who were behind the attacks you were receiving. And so they helped me get away from them and save my life. They helped me save my life eventually. And they taught me how they attacked me and how could I, stop these manipulations. And they taught me many things. And I'm really grateful for them, to be honest.
Welcome to Far Out with Faust, everybody. I am Faust Chicho, and today I'm delighted to be sitting here with Marina Seren. Let me tell you about this incredible young lady and what she's been up to. She's a 22-year-old experiencer from Madrid, Spain. Am I right, Marina? You're 22 now, right?
21.
Oh, you. Forgive me. She's a 21-year-old experiencer from Madrid, Spain. She's a psychic medium. She's an extrasensory seer. She's a channeler. She's an incredible artist. She's an ET contactee and abductee. She's also a secret space program psychic insider. So you can see why we have a lot to talk about. Marina, thank you so much for beaming in. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So, my God, I mean, it's just amazing to me. The more I listen to you on your interviews, I'm like, it blows me away how young you are. You probably get that a lot, but
yes,
yeah, I bet. It's remarkable. It's remarkable. The things that are coming out of your mouth at 21. My God, I don't even want to talk about what I was doing at 21. But so, I mean, let's take it back to when you were 15. I know that's when things really started to change for you, and when you started to come into some of this knowledge and you started to realize things about yourself. Can you take us back to the beginning of when this transformation really started to come online for you?
Yeah, sure. When I was 15 years old in the year 2016, I remember that I was focused on my dream career. I wanted to be a physicist. That's my dream, and it still is my dream. I'm pursuing that dream.
Oh, cool.
And so what I wanted to do, what I was fascinated about, is the idea of a theory of everything. Like the theory of all. Like Stephen Hawking. That wanted to give like an answer to that question, similar to that. So. One of my dreams was to create theories around, this question and try to give it like the most complete answer. So I wanted to study physics for that reason. And when I was in the middle of that process of trying to elaborate like my own hypotheses, is when I found out that you cannot really answer that question if you're not taking the element of consciousness in there. So that's when I became initiated in the world of metaphysics. And that's when my spiritual awakening or Kundalini awakening began.
I keep having to return to questions that are asked, especially like sometimes in my comment section, of people who they have a hard time understanding that oftentimes a Kundalini awakening, a spiritual awakening, can be well, let's just say intertwined, because there's no better word for it, with kind of an ET contact experience. And this fascinates me because, you have kind of people with traditional views who are like, no, Kundalini is an energy, but yet I've personally spoken to many people who've had this experience that is really interconnected, and if I understand your story correctly, that's what happened to you as well.
Right. I will say that these experiences are rather a projection of the Kundalini awakening.
Is that what you believe, that it's a so do you think it's an interpretation of the Kundalini awakening?
No, it's a projection of that energy being, let's say, activated within you and within your DNA.
I like that. Yeah. I've never thought about it that way, but it it's just amazing to me that those two things are so, at least right now in our present day and time, they're kind of, they go hand in hand. You know what I mean? Which is just crazy and cool and exciting and and scary all at the same time. And I can't imagine for at 15. I mean, that it must have been intense and a lot to deal with.
Yes.
What did you so can you how did you, and that's another question I get, is like, people are like, why would you, if you got that kind of a download, why would you seek guidance? Why would you seek spiritual guidance? I'm like, I would seek guidance because I got that kind of a download. That's a big, powerful, energetic download. I mean, if I'm like, I don't think this person who was talking to me had any experience with the energy, or else they may not have asked the question. Because if you have any experience, then you're like, yeah, you there's a lot to process, there's a lot to integrate, and guidance, I think, is probably one of the, I mean, in my opinion, you need it.
Yes, that's true. I requested, in fact, a lot of help from other realms of consciousness, mostly my star family and my guides, who were the biggest support I ever had, in that part of my life. And they helped me went through a lot of challenges. So I'm really grateful.
How was it being among peers when you had all this happening to you? And besides your guides, did you have anyone in the flesh to talk to about what was happening?
It was a really interesting experience because my classmates, sometimes they will try to bully me, not in meanest way, but to have fun, just to have fun, like, and I enjoy how open I will be to this kind of information. Because one day I was at class with my religious teacher, and he will be asking things like about philosophy and what we would think, what we thought it was going to happen. And I will say, oh, the Itsis are visiting us, they're reunited with us. And people will be like, what is he talking about?
Yeah.
And then I will explain, all this, all the downloads that I will receive, and be like, yeah, so we're in the middle of a session and this is going to happen, you know.
You
And
were
my
probably a nightmare for him. He was like,
yes.
get her out of here. Yeah. That's hilarious.
Unfortunately, that way I found another classmate that at the moment was also into this
Oh,
topic.
wow. Wow, the younger generations are incredible. That's so cool that you at least found a peer, you know, amongst your classmates. That's really cool. I can't imagine that happening. And I went to a religious school too, and I was often in trouble, but for other reasons. Um, I love when you talk about, and this is something that you've really spoke about a lot. So I hope I'm not, I don't want to bore you with my questions, but I love hearing you talk about, and it's personally a big interest of mine. The hybridization of humanity, and what was the purpose of it, right? I had just had an awesome conversation with Elizabeth April, and she said some things that I hadn't heard before, that I thought were really fascinating and that they resonated with me. And one of the things that she said that struck me was that one of the ways that you can get have a this kind of peace treaty, this interstellar, intergalactic, interdimensional peace, is to create a race with kind of I want to say sons and daughters, for lack of a better word, but to create a race of beings that has a little bit of the best of all of us in it. And she said that that's what Earth was for. There was this grand experiment, and was it tampered with? Yeah. What did some people throw their hat in the ring that, maybe we would have been better off if they didn't. I think that's safe to say, maybe. But things were allowed to happen, and they did. And I was just wondering what your take on all that is.
My perspective is that initially we were created as a slave species
Mm-hmm.
to especially mine gold in this planet for certain Anunnaki species
Mm-hmm.
who see us as their bastard children, not their true children.
Yeah.
And there is a faction of the Anunnaki, because there are many factions. There's a faction of the Anunnaki who see us as their true children. Those of that race and species are one of my closest star families. I get in contact with them, and they try to help me get away from the slavery of the other Anunnakis who were connected to elites and black operations, etc. But that perspective that she gave you, it's quite interesting. But actually what I see is that what's happening is quite the opposite. Like, we are being used for strategic purposes, for wars of lineages, of the spiritual lineages and species. And I have been witness of that myself, because I have different lineages coming, one from my father, one from my mother. So I observed how certain beings will fight over, for my attention or my
Mm-hmm.
collaboration with them. So
It's amazing to me because I talk to a lot of channels, and not many of them have or talk about the Anunnaki. I mean, I think a lot of people are aware of the Anunnaki, probably more so than even, like, people who have heard of the Palladians or the Arcturians, because the Anunnaki have such a notorious rep for the interference that they had, even among people who really have no idea. They're like, oh, they've kind of heard of the Anunnaki, which is always funny to me. But and I know from my own experiences and connecting, that of course there was parts of the Anunnaki who had bad intentions, and they were putting their plan in motion, and they got so far. But then there was parts of the Anunnaki that stepped in and said, this is wrong. What, you cannot do this, and we will not go along with it, and so there was, just like there is in humanity, and I feel like a lot of races that become physical at whatever point in their existence, there's kind of this conflict, this polarity to deal with. And so I'd love to hear more about your experiences and understanding of the Anunnaki and the different kinds of Anunnaki that there are.
sure. Well, actually, that's the kind of war or conflict I experienced myself. They were fighting over for me, for my, let's say, work, let's say, or
Mm,
connection. One of the groups of the Anunnakis that I love the most are beings from Capricorn constellation. They are blue skinned. They are connected to the Indian deities. That's why
mhm.
you see the Indian deities having blue skin, because of these Anunnaki species that, gave away their
Um,
spiritual knowledge and the culture eventually. And they're really also really very connected to the Druidics, mostly the Druidics, I will say, more than India. It's a lineage. That's why you can include India, Turkey, the UK, Germany. You can include all these countries, but the countries that they are mostly, or the cultures that they are mostly connected, are those of these Indo-European, let's say, cultures. You have India, and you have UK being the strongest for me, for these beings. They taught me a lot about this culture. They taught me a lot about Druidic and ancient Celtic paganism. And they showed me that, I was a descendant of, their lineage, their species, and that I was like supposedly like royalty to them, or that was like I had a royal blue blood. That's how they call it, and that's why they were working with me. But they always protected me when it comes to manipulation. They always were respectful. They never pushed me their way. In fact, when some beings started to see that are their political enemies, when they started seeing that I started working on becoming aware of them as my family, they started to interfere in my contact experiences with them, to the
mm,
point that I was attacked to almost like disease, almost like death. And they came to me, this Anunnaki came to me and said, you have been manipulated from the
Mm,
above levels. You have been these other Anunnaki entities who are our political enemies. They have targeted you. These greys have that are part of this group or working with these Anunnakis
mm.
have targeted you, and they are the ones who were behind the attacks you were receiving. And so they helped me get away from them and save my life. They helped me save my life eventually, and they taught me how they attacked me and how could I, stop these manipulations. And they taught me many things, and I'm really grateful for them, to be honest.
I'm sure. I think I heard you talking about that. And, it was amazing to me to hear about how they helped you, because there's nothing worse than being in a state of survival and anxiety.
Yes.
Not there's I can't think of a greater state of kind of extended torture than those two things kind of being bombarded, right? And so when I was listening to you talk about your story, I was like, my God, like what a nightmare that must have been. And so I was like waiting to hear how you got through it. And then when you finally you spoke, I think you were talking to Alan.
Yes.
Yeah, I love him. He's great. Um, you were telling him how through breath, that's what they when they taught you how to kind of defend and regulate against this bombardment you're experiencing. They taught you to use your breath, and through that you were able to kind of recalibrate everything.
Yeah.
That is such a colossal lesson for anyone who's listening. I think, like, with each breath comes salvation. And you can really learn to use your breath in any situation. Like right, I got punched in the chest last a couple days ago. And I was boxing, I was fighting, so I put myself in a position. But now it hurts when I take a deep breath. And I've been so, because when I take a deep breath, which is usually such a soothing, calming thing, I have pain. So I'm breathing more shallow. Like all day today, I just noticed that my energy is all off, and I'm like, well, no wonder it's all off. Like, it hurts when I breathe deep. So I was just thinking about your story, and I was like, my God, what a tremendous lesson. So they taught you how to how to stabilize and regulate against that kind of, I mean, onslaught that you were experiencing of anxiety. And um, I just think that's going to serve you your whole life. Like, it's what a tremendous gift they gave you.
100%.
Yeah, so
Because these
cool.
beings were targeting our my inner technology. We have inner technology in our bodies, which
Mm.
is all about metaphysics. It's like a electromagnetic field that is composed of many different, vortex of energies spinning in different directions, which is the chakra system, is the Merkaba. And so what they did is specifically to target me is to send psychic, let's say brainwaves psychically down those energy vortex and try to change the direction so that my whole body, my whole electromagnetic field will, become unstable.
Mm.
And I will eventually have a brain, like an aneurysm or like a
Yeah,
heart, attack. And so through breathing, which is the technique that regulates these energies, is how I stop the attack.
that's amazing. I just got back from a conference in Florida, and one of the speakers was Dr. JJ Hertek, and he wrote a book with Russell Targ, who they started the remote viewing program at CIA and all that jazz. But one of the things that he talked about, besides sound and sacred geometry, you know, when he would guide us through meditation, he would tell us that, if you can imagine yourself in the center of your DNA. And I know this, from my study of the Merkaba, of the light body, and how we all have this around us. We're all constantly putting out a field. But when you learn to control aspects of that field. Like when you learn that about your Merkaba, your light body, and you can begin to work with it. It's very powerful. It's very powerful, especially for protection of energy. And if you want to read more about that, there's a great book by Drumvalo Melchizedek, and he has this whole very. It's kind of. The process he wrote out is. It's a bit wordy. It's a bit long, it's an education, on your light body and how to use it. He goes really far with it. But I don't know if you've ever heard of Drumvalo in all these studies and talks you do.
Not really.
Yeah, he's an old school. He's an old school guy. He's been around a long time. He was writing a book, and he's like, there's this young archaeologist named Greg Braden coming up, and that's how old he is. In his books, Greg Braden was young. Not that Greg Braden is so old, but he's more of a mainstream guy. I don't know if you ever heard of Greg Braden.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was like, wow, that's crazy. Like, I was reading his old books, and he's like, here's a picture of me and Greg, and they were in Egypt, and he's like, and those are the Hathors, and he showed this picture of the Hathors, and it's just crazy to see. Greg Braden had like this giant head of hair. It was like from 1981. It was cool. But I read on your website, and I talk a lot about this on my show, and I probably talk about it even more so when I'm not on my show, which I don't know how crazy I make everyone about it. But we see a lot of programming happening in our society, and I think thankfully more and more people are realizing that we all get a computer. we're all born this computer, and then the software has to go on. Like, you can get a brand new state-of-the-art computer, and you can get it home and turn it on, and if there's no programs on it, what are you going to do with it? Nothing. You know what I'm saying? So what happens when you get a brand new computer and all the programs written on it are fucked up? Excuse my French. Then what happens? Well, great, you've got a powerful machine that has programs that are just kaputs. Like, that's going to be a disaster. So I think we're seeing that play out a lot in our society today, and people are realizing that. Sorry about that, my dog has something to say about that we are influenced by our cultural conditioning and societal programs. And so I know that you have what I want to ask you about is, MK Ultra, big conspiracy theory in the United States, right up until the time all the conspiracy quote theorists were validated, when the documents were declassified. Real program, government program, in America. There was a counterpart in the UK, and I'm sure there's unfortunately a counterpart in most quote civilized governments, and it has to do with mind control. It has to do with influencing a person so that they will act against their own will and do a service or an act that it would never normally do. There's a lot of ways that they accomplish this, but I know you have some experience with that, and I'm wondering how you found out about that, and how that took unveiled itself to you in your life.
Sure. Well, it started for me very young, of course, but when I became aware of it, it's when I started my spiritual awakening, in fact, because one day I was in school and I was having memories coming back, of parallel past lives, information downloads, etc., and even abduction scenarios. But one specific memory that came to me is of being on a laboratory at a really young age, and being experimented on, and really terrible, disturbing things going on, like a lot of torture, a lot of, experimentation, and a lot of trauma. So when that memory came to me, that click, and that caused me to have PTSD, which it took me like about 4 years to go through and heal eventually. And in the year 4 approximately of having developed that trauma, and having those memories coming and going and so forth and so on, like coming and always resurfacing in my brain. It's when I realized that maybe it was a form of mind control. And then it's when I started to see a part of my brain or my personality became, let's say, it started to disassociate, and I started to experiment how I was behaving strange,
Mm-hmm.
and I was starting to lose my identity, and I was obsessed with butterflies. I remember going crazy and buying butterfly necklace, butterfly
Mm-hmm.
clothes, butterfly. And I remember that I got like possessed, like one alter ego came, through me, and I started to lose my identity and
Mm.
become possessed, let's say, in a
Yeah.
sense, not really possessed, but in a sense. And that's when I started to research mind control. And when I read all the things that
Yeah.
about mind control, like the Monarch Project, which is the butterfly, the disassociation, the alter egos, the
Mm-hmm.
trauma, PTSD, is when I said, boom, there
Yeah.
you have it.
It
And
all
at that
clicked.
moment, it's when more memories of when I was in MK Ultra, like being experimented on the
Mm-hmm.
ships on the ground basis, came to me, and I was like, now I remember. I am
Wow.
part of this program.
It's those are all the both the techniques and the most common side effects or symptoms of those techniques that you listed. Disassociation. I mean, all these the compartmentalizing and the way the identity is stripped away. I'm going to email you this link, but it's a fascinating link. This guy did a study and he wrote a book. I think it's called Dark Persuasion. And they studied the origins of human conditioning, and of course, it started with Pavlov. I mean, as far as the way it's being used today, it started with Pavlov. Stalin learned what Pavlov was doing with his dogs, and he was like, "You're working for me." And of course, what choice did Pavlov have? But one of the most remarkable things that came out of Pavlov's lab, and his dogs. I think he's most famous for the whistles. Like everybody knows that Pavlov's dogs salivated when they blew the whistle, right? It's like kind of the most common. But the story that they don't hear about is there was a flood, and during the flood, all the dogs that were in crates in the basement were drowning. Basically, the whole basement was filling up, and they were in their crates, and just they had maybe like an inch, and just their noses were kind of, they howled until they couldn't howl anymore, and they were just trying to stay alive. And finally, a worker got in there, and he started to get them all out. But he said with each dog, he had to push them underwater to get them out of that crate. And he said every dog that he pushed underwater completely lost all of its training. I mean, basically like a new personality formed in the dog. He said if the dog was meek, it became, ferocious. If the dog was like super loving, and just super affectionate, it became meek. He said it's almost like a new identity, a new entity was in that dog after that level of trauma. And he told Stalin that, and and then of course the Nazis got a hold of this information. The states, our CIA, our programs got a hold of it, and they've been using it. They've been building on it and using it ever since. And it's just it's mind-blowing to me that more people don't understand it, because if you can understand it, you can resist it, you can heal from it. Yeah.
Agree.
That was a hell of a rant I went on. I apologize.
Oh, it was great. I didn't know about that experiment of I mean, I knew about Pavlov, but I
Yeah.
didn't know about that.
Yeah. It's crazy. Then they take something like that, and then the way that they maliciously build on that knowledge just blows me away. I think a lot of people have trouble believing it, because most people I think are good. They're decent and they're good people, and they can't imagine someone would have these plans for the world. But I'm like, yeah, just because you can't imagine doing it doesn't mean that those people are like you. because
Yeah.
they do and they can. But the other thing I love listening to you speak about that, and by the way, Marina has a YouTube channel that is flourishing, and it's, I mean, it's young, and it's already becoming very beautiful, like a flower. So if check it out, you can find we're going to tag her in our channel and include her website in our video description. But I was listening to you in one of your videos that from a few weeks ago, and I love the way that you talk about star seeds, and how they differ from certain seeds, and like the different reasons why humans incarnate. And I would love to hear you share that with my audience, because it's a very specific um, and I think a beautiful interpretation of all the ways I've heard it said.
Why starseeds incarnate, you mean?
Yeah, like so. I think a lot of people are like, curious about what's my star seed again. I'm like, listen, physiologically, you are a star seed because we are all we're literally made up of stardust, right? I mean, like, so when people hear this, they want to just dismiss it as woo woo, and I'm just like, dude, learn about learn about physics, learn about protons and supernovas, and you'll understand that we are here as a direct result of a star, and we wouldn't be here if not for a star. So, in one respect, we're all star seeds, I think, but in another respect, we all have this lineage, and I would love for you to talk about that lineage, and how people can maybe try to navigate ways to discover their particular lineage, starseed lineage.
Sure. So there are certain people that they have a higher percentage of this, extraterrestrial DNA. And because of that, souls that has at the same time in their own soul DNA or metaphysical DNA, more of this ET genetics in their percentage, in their makeup, they have the compatibility and they incarnate there. So those are star seeds. They are souls who have a higher percentage of ET DNA and who have a connection to to simultaneous incarnations, whether if it's in the past or the present or the future, that are not from Earth, but rather from other dimensions, other civilizations, or other star systems.
And I think I heard you talking about, I think you called them seeds, right?
Earth,
How are they different?
the Earthseeds are those who also have a lot of spiritual development or evolution, but their current connections to parallel lives, they have more of a higher number of connections to incarnations on Earth rather than on other star systems.
So do you think that the reason why, oh man, I don't even want to know. I'm hesitant to even contemplate the number of people on the planet who have not even maybe even thought about this, because that's hard for me to imagine and scary. But when I see people like you, and when I think about people who I admire and who inspired me to create this podcast, I see the effect that those people have on not only their audience but the people in their life, and how the lights start to go on, the dots start to connect, and that there's a conductivity, and it's a beautiful thing, to see people waking up to their true nature, which is much more than this. I mean, as amazing as this technology is that we have, this human technology, we are all so much more than that. And I think that, when people get caught up in this notion that this is our one life to live, and I got to do whatever I got to do to make it count, kind of that Darwinian um, mindset is the reason why we're in so much trouble today as a species. But when I heard you talking about star seeds, and I'm like, that it makes a lot of sense, because when people come into knowledge of their star seed, of their origin, inevitably that kind of contagious behavior is contagious, and it's infectious. Like it spreads. People want to know, and they're interested, and there's an excitement to it. So I loved hearing you talk about it in your interviews, and you do it so well. I don't know if you have anything to add about that.
Sure. What it fascinates me about starseeds, it's that um, it's like when you awake to your, or let's say connect current connections to those lifetimes, you are activating things within the human genome itself that are, connected at the same time with really ancient civilizations. So you find out that way the, let's say, confirmation that we all have this starseed DNA. And that's why we have souls coming from Sirius, from Andromeda, from Pleiades, etc., because it's in our DNA. There's a compatibility there. There's a history there. So that's why you see, this kind of activations being so powerful, because those are the species that created us, and those are the species that gave us the most amount of culture, knowledge, etc., and genetics. So it's fascinating with us when a soul reconnects to that origin, and
Yeah.
start to download information.
Yeah. It's magical, and it's fascinating. It's magical, and I mean, it's energetic, for lack of a better word. It's an amazing thing. Having experienced it, and so I mean, I guess if you're listening and you're curious, follow your intuition, and listen. And I mean, it sounds so cliche, but I'm going to keep saying it anyway. Listen to your heart. If you see a book and you're like, I should get that book, don't doubt yourself. Just get it. You know what I mean? Get it and pick it up, because you may just find yourself reading it. Maybe it's a book about the Palladians. Maybe it's a book about the Arcturians. But when you're reading it, your level of excitement and the amount of which the words resonate with your DNA, with your soul, you're going to know it. And you're going to start to make correlations and get downloads, and you're going to be able to feel that viscerally. I don't mean like, mentally. I mean in your body, in your heart. You're going to know that you're in the right place and doing the right thing. Your whole body is going to be one big, I guess, affirmation or confirmation that what you're doing is right on your path. I mean, that was my experience in this exploration. And I imagine Marina's had probably more than one experience that's similar.
Yes, that's true. You are guided to those books or channels or whatever material that it is that are most connected to your lineage and its on purpose. So it's fascinating. Yes.
Absolutely. It's always on purpose. I teach my kids, I'm like, listen, this word coincidence, it's made up. It's not a real word.
Yes.
Okay. I'm like, is it the only reason why people believe in coincidences is because they have not correlated, their actions and their thoughts and their deeds and what has transpired in their life. If they did, if they could, they would realize there's no such thing as coincidence. There's synchronicities, and those can be crazy, but they're not coincidence. No.
Exactly.
I get a kick out of teaching my kids about things that I never knew growing up. Um, but so I know that you talked about, and we talked a little bit about the Anunnaki, which is, I mean, it's so fascinating, this race of beings who, I always wonder, what they needed gold for. And so if people realize that we were bred to be subservient in many ways, that was part of, well, I think part of the reason why they saw the way the primates were hierarchical already. They saw the way the primates naturally followed a leader, right? And so they were like, it's right there. all we got to do is play with this a little. It's a lot of it is right there. But also they wanted a subservient slave caste, to do the dirty work. And my understanding is that they needed gold. And I'm wondering if that's what you understand as well, or if that's what you've picked up on. And I'm wondering what they needed it for in your, like, what you understand, because I've heard a few different things about that.
The story and the downs that I got is also that of the creation of humanity before slavery for mining gold. But still, it's not the only reason that I got for what we were created, or the only people that were behind this creation.
Mm-hmm.
The whole idea or theories that tell that only the Anunnaki were part of this experiment and only for the matter of slavery is completely incomplete.
Yeah.
And it's on purpose. Like the reason why they're selling that story as to that only that part of the story, it's on purpose so that we connect, like our DNA starts to connect with a really specific timeline of the Akashic records of this planet, and we download information from that so that with that energy we recreate or recycle that history, that story.
Yeah. Oh
Because
my God.
everything, yes.
It's what you just said is like, I see us doing it, and I, there's a part of me that wants to like scream from the mountaintops, like we have to stop. We are going to continue to create this unless we kind of become conscious of the fact that we're recreating this over and over. And you see it, I mean, like, we literally have a 1% that we call the quote elite, and we pretend like they're not ruling the planet. We pretend like they have not allocated all the assets and the governments, and that they are not pulling the strings. I mean, I don't pretend that. But there are people out there still living in complete denial of this, and they think that we live in this fantasy world called the democracy. And I'm like, dude, like, it's crazy to me, the amount of delusion that people live with. But that's more comfortable for some people, and I understand that. Ignorance can be bliss. Can be, not always. Yeah. But what you said is very profound, and I talk about it a lot. This fact that if you're not aware of something, you're creating from the past, and if your past is traumatized, you're recreating trauma. And I think it's everywhere right now.
100% true.
It's unfortunate, but well, hopefully conversations like this help people, become aware that this is a cultural, and I mean, really, I think it's in most parts of the species, certainly not all of it, but there are some people who are really separate and not living connected to this matrix that we're living in, I think. But those people are definitely, I think, living longer and healthier lives.
Yes, right.
What so you've got your channel is up and running. I know that you offer a few different things, services, in your on your website. I see that, and I'm wondering, what else you have, what else you're working on. Are you still pursuing becoming a physicist? I think that, first of all, I think that's an amazing and wonderful endeavor, and you should definitely pursue it.
100%. I'm still pursuing that dream. In the meanwhile, I'm working on some projects, such as my book. I'm writing my book. I am, with all of the channelings and downloads that I ever had so far. I am also working on, mediumship. I work with clients, and on my channel, of course, my YouTube channel.
Excellent. Excellent. It's very cool. I had a lot of thoughts while I was, catching up on all your interviews and learning about you, and I could see why, there was a battle for your voice, you know, being so young and having the lineage that you do, being as connected as you are, and you know, you have a very specific look about you, and so I see that there's no, your potential for reach and how much you can make your voice heard is big. And I feel like the reason why, obviously, there was such an ongoing struggle for who's who are you going to come out for when you do get your microphone and start to reach a large amount of people. I think clearly that's what it was about. But I was just thinking, like, and I was looking forward to telling you, the more you the more you slow down and the more you breathe and the more you kind of just continue to plug in, and ground yourself, you're going to become, I think, such a beacon of light, that those things that were, that were able to affect you the way they were, it's going to be such a distant memory to you in a few years, when you get to be to the ripe old age of like 25. Yeah, I mean, you're such a incredible soul for how young you are. It's amazing to see.
Thank you.
Very cool. Yeah. So I don't know if you probably didn't even have a chance to watch any of my podcasts, but I love
Yeah,
asking.
I watch some of them.
Oh, cool, cool. Oh, listen, if you're listening, Rob Gauthier, I love you, man, and your amazing wife, and Treb and Ardif, and I made a note to myself to give Rob a shout out. That's the ET Whisperer. He's a dear friend of mine. I love him. Um, Wonderful family. If you guys want to check out some incredible channelings, check out the ET Whisperer. He's also has a YouTube channel, and he's got his
These
website.
guys help me so much too.
They're amazing, aren't they? I
They're
love them.
amazing.
Yeah. And I saw the special that he did with you and Alan. You guys were so great together, and I enjoyed it so much. It's awesome.
Cute dog.
Thank you. She's like, can I be on camera? I love to talk to people about, especially channels and people who talk about metaphysics and who are well versed in it the way you are. My dog's gonna be like, before you do that, can you let me out? I'm so sorry. 1 second.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, that's Lilu.
Cute name.
Yeah. I don't know if you ever saw, there's an old movie called The Fifth Element.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what she's named after, Lily, that character, The Fifth Element. Yeah. So I wanted, what was I gonna, oh yeah, I remember. So, I talk a lot about, and I have this podcast, and I love sharing information, and new perspectives with people, and I'm always trying to find ways to enrich the quality of life that people are experiencing, and that, to me, comes with a shift in perception, comes with a shift in belief, and it's sometimes it's a single shift away. I was just listening to, have you ever heard Bruce Lipton talk about the biology of belief and the power of
Yes.
beliefs? He's an incredible speaker on that, doctor and scientist. But and I teach my 10-year-old this because he already at 10, he's becoming self-conscious about his body, and sometimes he's upset, and I'm reading to him in bed, and I'm like, what are you thinking about? And I got to get him to kind of recontextualize the way he's thinking about tomorrow. He's thinking about, what happened today, in a way that will help him instead of cause him anxiety.
Yeah,
um,
right.
and it's, but it's something I learned far too late in life. And I love to give my guests an opportunity to speak on that a little bit, and possibly give someone who's listening, certainly, a few words that might enable them to experience a greater expression of their humanity here on in this incarnation on this planet right now.
Sure. I think that everybody has to become who they truly are. Otherwise, they will never become what they are. That's the law of the universe that I found to be the most shocking, and accurate. And it's that, for instance, if you are aligned with your truer self, you can be what is your essence, which is love, light, etc. Many people say, oh, I have to wake up to who I am, and they say, I am light, I am love, I am unity. And I say, no, that's what you are. Now, who you are is how you express that in your own unique way. Such as colors, all colors are made of light waves, right? But each color has an identity. They cannot say, I am light, because all the rest of the colors are also light. What makes them unique is their own frequency, their own, frequency signature. It's the same with human beings and with anybody, any organism or consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah. We have this gift of individuality, right?
Right. That's why God, the all that is, fractalized itself.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what we are. We're little individuations of God, of source. And when you start to kind of revel in that idea, I don't know, like, I mean, when I did, life got a lot more fun. Things started happening that I would have written off as impossible. And so, if you're listening and you made it this far into our podcast, I just encourage you to contemplate that, and how powerful you are as a human being, as a human being on this planet, because there's no time like the present. Literally, that's a true statement. People are like, that's such a great and tricky statement. There's no time like the present, because it's literally the truest statement that there is. You know what I'm saying? People are always like, that's a catchy phrase, but what does it mean? Yeah. But well, I mean, let me ask you this, Marina. What what else? What are you excited about right now that you'd like to share? Is there anything? I mean, I told everyone you got to check out her videos on her channel. She's got like a ton of other. If you want to hear her speak more about her growing up and then coming into this kind of knowledge that she has, there's a lot of podcasts where she has done that. I was trying to cover some things that I was interested in, things that I know that she hasn't talked about so much, or at least I tried. I don't know if I did a good job or not. If I covered a lot of things that you've been talking about for a long time. But is there anything else you'd like to share, Marina?
Yes. I wanted to share that it's really important right now to develop discernment when it comes to ET agendas. And this is something that is the latest kind of information that I've been speaking up about, like an activist, let's say, because there is this trendy new age agenda that has become so famous and so pursued by everyone, which is the hybrid gray agenda. And I was one of the people who was supposed to be a big promoter of this. And I have a story, like a really deep story that I'm not gonna go all the way into it, but summarizing it, I was working with government people, not in the physical format, but in my astral format. I was working with government people and agents who had treaties with these gray hybrids. so that I was their Trojan horse for this agenda to be introduced more in the community,
Mm.
so that people will accept these beings coming to our planet, being part of our society, breathing with us, creating another species, and this species will, like replace us in a sense. And this is not something that I, let's say, got just myself. This
Mhm.
is the plan that they say through channels all around the world, and
Yeah,
they
it's a
say
very popular,
yes.
subject.
So yeah, I just a reminder that we need to develop discernment, because
Yeah.
unfortunately there's a lot of manipulation going on right now in the spiritual and UFO community. So
Yeah, it's a long and very common theme. You know, Bashar talks about the hybrid babies a lot. I'm glad that you mentioned it, because somehow I forgot to. I have it in my notes because I wanted to talk to you about it, and and time got away from me, and I forgot to ask you about it. But I heard you talking about it, and I was like, wow, it's such a, you've heard, if you're in the channeled community, or you've been, if you've studied and listened to Bashar, and you've inevitably heard the word hybrid baby. I mean, one of the most common questions Bashar gets, especially when he used to do the interviews live, was like, how many hybrid babies do I have? People would ask him this.
yes.
To which he would usually respond, how many do you think you have? um,
Right.
and that comes from a lot of things about the grays, and look, there's a lot of documents, declassified documents, that show that actually, there were government meetings with ETs, and I'm not making that up. I'm talking about real documents that maybe they're calling right now. I'm so sorry.
They busted you. It's okay, you can.
That's them right now. No, I think they hung up. Um, I always forget to shut that damn phone up. I'm so sorry. But so what you're saying, the way you talk about it, and the way that the downloads you've had about it, I was like, wow, I hadn't heard that perspective before. And it's kind of a lot to go into, but summed up, it's basically like, use discernment, because there are a lot of people who are presenting certain information, and their agenda is not as benevolent as you imagine. I think, does that sum it up a little bit?
Yeah, the summary I will say, it's that they are a product of timelines crossing, connecting by hybridization programs, etc. And so naturally, as every species want to survive, they are trying to force us to take that path of, accepting them as being part of our society and mixing with them, etc. here, so that they survive,
Mm.
let's say. But the trick is we're going to die if you don't help us. No, they can go into another planet and eventually create their own civilization.
Mm.
But the Greys want Earth, because they know that how important it is to have a planet linked to a DNA or a species in order to evolve. They're just ambitious people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's the trick. The trick is we're going to die, or we no. And the trick is that the children are not children anymore. They have
No.
grown up, but they keep them in the age of a child, so that when they come here and they meet their parents, they have like a cute, like
Yeah, of
baby
course.
face, saying, "Oh,
They
please."
know that literally releases, neurochemicals, biochemicals in the body that say love, love and take care of this little being, because we're literally wired for that.
Yes, and
That's,
I didn't make that up. They say that through Bashar.
wow. Yeah. Well, we'll have to have another podcast about that, in like 6 months to see what else develops and if anything changes, because that's a whole nother can of worms that I don't know if we can open that right now. But you're remarkable. I love what you're doing, and your age and your beauty. You're limitless in what you're going to do. And so I just encourage you to keep the company that you're keeping. You have wonderful, wonderful people around you like Rob, and you know, the sky is the limit.
Alan.
Yeah, it's so cool to finally talk to you. I'm up here, but I'm also a fan of yours. So I love what you're doing. I love your pictures, and it's just you're breaking the mold, and
Oh,
and
thank you so much.
yeah, so it's so cool to finally get a chance to talk to you. And I appreciate your time very much.
Likewise.
Yeah. But I'm sure that I'll be in touch with you, and I'm going to include links to all your stuff so people can, I'm sure everyone is going to be interested in checking out your channel and your stuff, and we'll make sure they can do that.
Great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Marina. You take care. And hey, have a good night's sleep tonight, because I know it's late there.
You have a good rest of the day then.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. Thanks everyone for tuning in and staying with us. And all right, we'll see you guys on the other side.